Katie, shall we kick
Yeah,
off?
let's get going. Hello,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you for joining us in your precious lunch hour. I'm Katie Rains, I'm CEO of Indigo, and I'm really pleased that you can all join us today to understand some of what's been going on with arts audiences in the last year. So I'm going to be joined by Kerry, Indigo Associate Director, and later by Laura Smith from Hull Truck Theatre and Natalie Phillips, who's just joining now from Landmark Theatres. And they've been using Indigo Share subscription for some time. So we're going to take you through how we collect the data we'll be presenting, then talk through the picture that we're seeing of audiences collectively, how they're behaving, what they're thinking. And then Natalie and Laura will share how they're using Indigo Share data in their organisations to make decisions that can drive change. So please do put any questions you've got in the chat as we go along. We'll answer as many as we can later in the session. We also have closed captioning if you'd like to turn those on. They're at the bottom of the screen, a little CC in a box. We'll also be recording the session so we can make that available to you later if you want it or want to share it with other colleagues. So as you know, at Indigo, we believe that an audience-centric organisation is a more successful one. We're in the business of gathering the best possible audience insight, putting it into your hands, the hands of cultural organisations, so that you can make audience-centred decisions and will ultimately be successful and sustainable. But we do that in a different way, which is based on collaboration. Rather than simply working with one organisation at a time to help them understand their own audiences, we've developed an approach that not only gives real-time data to that individual organisation, but also builds a collective data set that we can all benefit from, allowing us to share insight with the sector as we're doing today. So I'd like to thank you if you're one of the organisations that is part of Indigo Share and has contributed to this data set, and to encourage you to join us if you're not. So before we go through the insight, I'm just going to briefly talk a little bit about Indigo Share and how it works and how we create those data sets. So Indigo Share subscription is our collective approach to help arts and cultural organisations understand their audiences. We also have hot topics like At Green and Access Culture, which explore the biggest questions of the moment. But Indigo Share subscription is our post-visit survey, which builds a long-term picture of audiences' experience at arts organisations. The aim is that the organisations can gather data about their own audiences that's essential for their decision-making, but in a way that's also possible to build vitally useful benchmarks. So these benchmarks benefit all the organisations who are subscribers, but they also help us to tell a story about the sector. For some, that might mean we can make a clearer case for support. For others, a way to talk about policy in the context of audience behaviour. We only gather data that actually tells organisations something useful about their audiences, and they can see it live as it comes in throughout the year. We've developed really easy to use surveys, so we hope to make everyone's lives easier. We do all the thinking, consultation with the wider sector, survey design, testing and setup, which means consistent questions and reliable data for each organisation about their own audiences. Any reporting you need to do for Arts Council, the British Film Institute or Julie's Bicycle is easy because we've aligned our questions with theirs, and we provide free uploads where necessary. So funder reporting should be a breeze. I was going to say a joy, but maybe a breeze is enough. And the benchmark is, of course, key, enabling organisations to see where you are, see where you're performing and how you're performing compared to the wider sector. And as we grow Indigo Share, so does the richness of that benchmark and the option to look at regional or art form benchmarks, which we're planning to do later this year. Subscribers receive the full benchmark reports twice a year, and annually we produce an overall benchmark summary to share openly, which is what we're doing today. Indigo Share is made up of 3 strands. Our hot topics are sector-wide surveys that tackle the topic of the moment. So things like Act Green, Access Culture, Tomorrow's Audience, which I know a lot of you have been part of. Discover is newly launched and offers access to our unique panel of over 15,000 culturally engaged people from across the UK. So this offers ready-made services that allow you to rapidly get the insight you need to make better decisions, from doing a quick poll with those people with results in 72 hours to perhaps mystery visits to your venue from people who haven't been before, so you can hear feedback from them and work out how to really get non-attenders to come. All the details of that are on our website, and Kerry will put the link in the chat. And if you're already an Indigo Share subscriber, you get a big discount on Discover. And then finally, Indigo Share subscription, which is what we're showing you the results of today. So a quick run through of what Indigo Share subscription actually includes before we get into the findings. The heart of Indigo Share subscription is our award-winning post-visit survey, tried and tested over many years and co-created in consultation with the sector. We want it to be a nice experience for audiences as well as for organisations, so we try and keep it really simple and clear. It's usually sent between 1 and 7 days after people have attended, and most organisations now automate this via their ticketing system, so it just happens. You can add your own bespoke questions as standard, although obviously those aren't benchmarked because they're bespoke. Each survey is branded with the organisation's logo and colours, and we also provide Arts Council England funded organisations with the files to upload to Illuminate completely free. And we also now offer the questions to be able to report on audience travel to Julie's bicycle, complete with a quick view of that data to help your reporting at no extra cost. Subscribers have access to live data through a range of viewing options, including seeing results by show and monitoring key performance indicators. And there's some ready-made dashboards to focus people on the key metrics. Organisations use this in lots of different ways, and Laura and Natalie are going to talk a little bit about that later. Twice yearly benchmark reports compare individual organisations' results with those of all other organisations in Indigo Share, so they can see how they're performing in relation to the sector. We also compare demographic data against the census, so it can be viewed in context. It's worth mentioning that at Indigo, we've all worked in arts organisations, and we know how hard it can be sometimes to find time to reflect on audience insight and to use it to inform planning. So we offer 2 one-to-one sessions per year as part of Indigo Share subscription, and here's a picture of Flo in action. We've been doing these with our subscribers just over the last few weeks, and it's been really insightful to dig into each organisation's audience responses and find ways to interpret and use the insight that's being generated. And it's always our favourite time of the year to be talking to all the Indigo Share clients. So now you're all familiar with how we've collected that data, I'll hand over to Kerry to take us all through the headlines from this year's Indigo Share subscription UK benchmark.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So as Katie explained, the data that I'll be sharing today has been collected through post-visit surveys from over 50 Indigo Share subscribers across 2024-25. And we've got a real range of organisations using the surveys. We've got producing and receiving theatres, some art centres, some in urban areas, including London, others more rural, and they range hugely in capacity and are based across the UK. So together, they generated 171,000 responses from audiences, which is almost triple the number in last year's benchmark. We calculate the benchmark figures as a weighted average, so that for each metric, we look at the average figure from each organisation and then take an average across those, rather than taking one big aggregated average. And this basically means that larger organisations, which typically generate more responses, aren't able to skew the benchmark. So today I'm going to be looking at the overall results, and then how these compare with the 15% of respondents who attended that organisation they were responding on for the first time, the 8% who attend any arts only once a year or less, and the 8% who are aged under 35, which is actually a big jump from last year's 5%. So where relevant, I've also compared some results with data from last year and with census data. Before we dive in, just to say that I'm looking at the results through our Indigo Total Insight model, which we designed as a really simple way of thinking about audiences through these 4 lenses. So a combination of understanding your audience profile, how they're behaving, their attitude, both to your organisation and to the arts generally, and then the impact that cultural attendance has on them. And we think that that gives us a kind of clear, well-rounded understanding of audiences. but also gives you the opportunity to build in other data sources to complement survey data. So just before we start, a quick note on data validity and reliability. So we get a lot of questions about whether data from surveys is robust, is reliable. The most common things being like, what about survey fatigue amongst audiences? Can I rely on these results? And how can I be sure that this data actually represents my audiences? So these are very valid concerns. So what we've done, rather than taking up even more time today, is we've written up our thoughts about this on a blog piece, which is on the website now, and Jacob's hopefully going to drop that link into the chat now. And it looks at things like statistical calculations around confidence intervals and margin of error and issues around sampling. But it is worth saying that surveying is only one way of measuring audiences. And as with many methodologies, there is, of course, inbuilt bias, things like the fact that surveys only go to bookers, not all of the attenders. And we know that, for example, women tend to be more likely to book than men. We see that in the data. We know that certain groups of people might be more likely to complete a survey, such as people who have very strong opinions or who are regular attenders and love your organisation. It's not a truly random sample in the way that most of us do surveying. So we really believe you should be triangulating this data with other methods, whether that's ticketing data, if you have it, maybe social media comments, perhaps even reviews, and so on. But the key thing about the Indigo benchmark is that everyone's in the same boat. So while the kind of pursuit of truth can be a bit of a frustrating conversation internally sometimes, at least with this benchmark, you're comparing apples with apples. This means internal and external reporting can be done in the context of a comparative bigger picture. So if there are typically more of one type of person who respond to surveys, well, that's the same for everybody in the benchmark. So it is useful to look at it in the relative sense rather than always thinking about absolutes. Okay, so we're going to move on to the results finally now after all of that preamble. And we're going to talk through some of the overall findings, starting with audience profile. Who are our audiences and how representative are they of the population? Well, the key points on profile, which we do tend to repeat year on year, is that our audiences are, as we know, not representative of the general population. They skew significantly older, with this year in our benchmark 66% of audiences aged 55 or over, compared to between 35 and 38%, depending whether your census is the England and Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland census. And this is pretty consistent with last year's findings. Only 8% are under 35, which compares to about 30% in the census, and that's even having excluded children under 16. But it is much higher than last year. First-time attenders are about twice as likely to be under 35, though, representing about 15% of those audiences. Those attending less frequently, so once a year or less, also skew younger than more frequent attenders. Audiences also aren't representative in terms of ethnicity, in England and Wales at least. 94% of respondents identified as white or white British, 95% last year, so fairly consistent, compared with 82% in the England and Wales census. Despite this having been a real focus for many organisations, this hasn't really changed since 2019. Under 35s are much closer to that overall census figure, though, with 85% of people describing themselves as white or white British, so much more diversity within ethnicities for younger people. There has, however, been an increase in audiences identifying as deaf or disabled, which has gone up from 11% last year to 15% this year, which is closing in on the census benchmark of 18% across England and Wales, although behind the Scotland and the Northern Ireland figures. Whether this means we're welcoming more disabled people or more disabled people are completing the surveys, it's good news in terms of diversity and access. The story continues to be, however, that as a sector, we're not attracting a representative population of the UK. Arts audiences are also generally better off than the population, with just over half saying that they have a salary higher than the UK average, which is slightly up on last year. Almost a third, 31%, said their salary was lower or significantly lower than average, which is slightly fewer people than last year. It's interesting to note that a significant proportion is still affected by financial concerns which limit their attendance of arts and culture. Almost 3/4 are still affected either a little or a lot. Now, everyone was talking about cost of living crisis last year, but the same issues are still affecting people, so that hasn't gone away. For first-time attenders, 20% are affected a lot, compared to this 17% overall, so slightly more. But for the under 35s, this jumps right up to 29%. So we know that under 35s are really facing the pinch compared to the overall audiences. Lower frequency attenders are also impacted, so perhaps they're coming less often because of money concerns just as much as their own preferences. So the second part of the total insight model looks at behaviour. How are audiences behaving in relation to your organisation and culture in general? So what are audiences looking for? We asked them how they would describe their artistic and cultural preferences in general. So the majority say they're looking for good entertainment, particularly the under 35s. But a significant proportion are more adventurous and say they like seeing a variety of things. And this has gone up this year. And approaching half are willing to try something new. Again, this is higher for our under 35s who seem a bit braver to give things a go or are seeking novelty perhaps. Younger people lean, younger people lean more heavily on recommendations. So word of mouth is important for about 1 in 4 audiences overall, but is hugely important for under 35s. With nearly 41% saying this is a key preference. That's nearly twice the overall benchmark rate. So getting young people talking about what you do is really critical. When asked to think about what motivated them to attend for that particular visit, which they're answering the survey about, unsurprisingly, audiences tend to say that seeing that particular production was the main motivation. Social motivators, though, such as spending time with friends and family and special occasions, are also really important motivators. However, the big story this year is the surge in people motivated by an affinity with the organisation. It's gone up from 14% last year to 24% this year. And this really supports the investment in relationship building marketing, whether it's brand campaigns, telling your impact story with clarity to your audiences, or maybe a fantastic CRM strategy. Attachment to an organisation, your overall brand, can help you weather the storm of a dodgy production, help you fundraise, and help drive word of mouth. So it's really worth consciously investing in this piece of the marketing puzzle. Comparing the benchmark with under 35s, we see that under 35s are much more socially motivated, attending cultural organisations to spend time with friends and family, as well as more likely to come for special occasions. Special offers are also reaching young people. Hopefully this is mainly things like young person schemes, and if so, that does seem to be working as a motivator. We also ask audiences how they found out about the particular event they came to see, and they can select from a whole range of marketing channels. Emails from the organisation, the venue website and social media are key channels, and we saw a significant shift in responses since 2019, but this has now really seemed to have stabilised into a more reliable pattern. The data also shows that first-timers and under 35s are more likely to have been recommended by friends and family, as well as more likely to see a social media post or advert, while your regulars, who are on your mailing list and know where to look, skew towards emails and website. Interestingly, however, the group most likely to have looked at your website is the under 35s. That's worth bearing in mind in terms of priority audiences for your messaging and design. We know that audience travel is a huge part of the overall carbon footprint of an arts organisation, so it's really good that this year's results show a positive shift away from petrol and diesel cars towards public transport and hybrid or electric cars, as well as a slight increase in walking. While the public transport infrastructure is, of course, heavily dependent on an organisation's location, when looked at on an aggregated sector basis, this is really good news. All groups were actually similarly likely to take public transport, but under 35s were much less likely to drive. Now, further incentivising and promoting green travel could shift the dial even more, although it's worth thinking about things like show start and end times if we really want to accelerate change. We have found in multiple projects this year that audiences really worry about getting home late at night, so it's impossible to view transport in isolation of that. The third part of the total audience model is attitude. What do audiences think of cultural venues and what kind of experience have they had? Well, the good news is that arts attenders are having a great time. The benchmark Net Promoter Score, which asks audiences if they would recommend your organisation and gives a score from -100 to +100, is even higher than last year's 71 at 74. For context, although these figures can vary depending on source and what you find on the internet, First Direct, which is really famous for amazing customer service, has an NPS of 63, so we are doing really well. Scores for both first-time attenders to your venue and returning audiences are high, with returning audiences, despite often being the ones to complain about the toilets or the bar, even more likely to recommend you. Audiences also think your staff are great. The surveys are filled with positive comments, and 88% of audiences say that they felt welcome and included. When asked to rate the value for money of different aspects of the experience, tickets ranked most highly on value for money, and this is true across all segments, with first-timers and under 35s actually a fraction higher on their ratings at 4.3. So it's not necessarily the case that younger people feel that value for money is poor, for example, as we can sometimes assume. Then finally, what impact is cultural attendance having on your audience, and what impact do you have on the local community more broadly? Well, at a time when we need to prove economic impact as well as personal and artistic, it's worth noting the revenue that audiences are contributing to the local economy, whether on dining out locally or shopping and visiting other attractions nearby. First-time visitors to a venue are even more likely to spend their money locally, with a huge 12% staying overnight in paid-for accommodation. This is even more remarkable when you consider that none of the organisations in this benchmark are those big London West End theatres that people might see as a kind of special bucket list treat. There are a few London venues, but none of those huge theatres. So this really does represent investment across a whole range of regions. However, the dial is not shifting on communicating sustainability. Still, only half of audiences think that you're doing enough to show a clear commitment to environmental sustainability. So there's more to do here. However, audiences do hold cultural organisations in very high regard. The overwhelming majority of audiences agree with the statement that the organisation who sent them the survey is important to our local community, an incredible stat really, showing how much they value arts organisations in society and the wider cultural ecosystem. And 80% agree that the organisation leads the way for culture locally, which has actually gone up from 72% last year. So we're now going to hand over to our special guests, Natalie and Laura, and then Katie's going to share 5 key takeaways from our benchmark report this year. So first of all, I shall hand over to Laura.
Thank you, Kerry. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Smith. I'm the Head of Marketing and Communications here at Hull Truck Theatre. Just wanted to fill you in about our journey with Indigo. So we first started working with Indigo back in 2023 when they helped us deliver a research project, which was all about informing ticket increase. And the benefit of working together consistently since then has been that we've been able to compare data year on year, monitor and see where we're doing things right and where we're making improvements. And we have got that all important benchmark as well, which we find really useful. And it's helpful for both internal and external purposes, but I'm going to focus on external today. Next slide, please. Thank you. It's like being in COVID again, isn't it? So just a little bit about Hull Truck Theatre, for those of you who don't know. So we were established in 1971 by our founder, Mike Bradwell, who sadly passed away last month. But we're a producing theatre and a receiving house, and we're based right in the centre of Hull. We do loads of work on stage, but we do a lot of work in the community as well, connecting with groups and families in areas where there are low arts engagement. We've got a really loyal customer base, and we're thrilled with that, but we're obviously always looking for new people to come through our doors. And last year we welcomed over 70,000 audiences, which was amazing. And we're really committed to telling those northern stories, which are locally rooted but global in outlook. So that's a little bit about us. Now, how we use the data that we get from our reports. So key thing for us externally is our funders. So Arts Council being our main one. We're an NPO organisation. And so to meet our funding obligations, we need to report quarterly to ACE against a list of activities that directly relate to KPIs, which then feed into our investment principles, which I'm sure a lot of you probably understand. So for example, one of our KPIs is that our average show rating for audiences who visit a Hull Truck Theatre production should be no lower than a 4-star. And we were delighted to learn that the average performance rating at the end of last year was actually 4.6, which was also in line with the benchmark figure. So that was brilliant, and really made sure that we were aligned with what we said we were going to do. Also, from a sustainability and green credential perspective, we've touched on this lightly, but we've got a much higher proportion of audiences using the car to visit the theatre just because of our location and where we are. So that's 73% versus the 54% benchmark. But that does fit in with the fact that we pull most of our audiences from a 30-minute drive time. and that public transport links are not as robust in the city as they are in other areas of the UK. However, the data did make sure that we could pick out the positives from this, which were that the electric and hybrid car travel was actually 2% above benchmark. So we felt like that was a really big win for the year, and we included that in our reporting too. Then our other key funder is Hull City Council. We attend an annual scrutiny meeting with them where we have to demonstrate where their funding's had a return on investment, and also what we're doing to align with their wider community plans. So things like the information Kerry just picked out about where we sit within that cultural economy and what organisations think about us and what individuals think about us is really, really important. So I think how important we were to the local community was a whopping 95%. So that was something that we really wanted to shout about and talk about. And 88% of audiences believed that we were leading the way culturally in the local area. Again, really fantastic, and we want to shout about that. And the economy and fitting into what people are doing when they're visiting us and spending money locally, again, trying to get that nighttime economy and looping that story together about how important it is that we all work together is a key thing. Okay, so then, yeah, awards. It's been really useful to lift comments and stats to help bolster award bids with evidence, because you're only really going to get shortlisted for something if you can include that kind of backup. Customer comments about their experiences when they've been at Hull Truck Theatre, along with staff ratings and NPS scores, have been really useful to help back up our bids in the last year. And we've included stats from sustainability, both from our individual surveys that we do, but also taking part in the 2 big Act Green surveys. That was really valuable feedback. We've recently been shortlisted for a range of different awards, from organisational wide contribution to the local area to specific areas of excellence, including sustainability and inclusion and access. And we were really chuffed that we won this award last year at the Yorkshire Post Tourism Awards for our accessible and inclusive tourism contribution. So really chuffed with that. And then third area is our wider comms strategy. So the information really helps us understand the areas where we're getting the comms right, but also where we need to improve some of our messaging. So the environmental impact from audiences is obviously quite low at a benchmark figure of 50%. We were coming in at 59%, which we were pleased about, but it also identifies that there is some work to do there. And as an example, we've produced these little table toppers for our bar area, which show all the different things we're doing sustainably, and really just try to make sure that there's palatable information there about what we're doing for that green commitment so that audiences can see it firsthand. From the last report, we identified also that we need to do something with aligning well-being, because that's such a positive byproduct of a theatre or a cultural and arts experience. And actually, we maybe need to leverage that a bit more in our comms going forward. So that's something that we're going to focus on. We obviously take this feedback to meetings, and we have a weekly comms meeting, and we talk about how audiences perhaps heard about a specific event and why they attended. And although it's not the same across the board, but a brochure for us is actually still really important for our audiences. So it means that that's something that we're not going to give up anytime soon, because 27% of people said that that's where they heard about an event and ended up booking an event from. And social media is obviously a growing area, so we're investing a lot of time to make sure that those channels are curated nicely and really effective and turning people into sales, basically. Yeah, evaluation as well. So we take these to project meetings, which can inform things that happen externally as well. So we hope to produce and program different types of shows that offer audiences something different. So it's always useful to see whether or not what we wanted to do has happened. So for example, with a production like Animal Farm, we would want audiences to come out of that feeling challenged. Whereas something like Little Shop of Horrors, we might want them to come out feeling like they'd been entertained and they'd had some escapism. So seeing those metrics and how people have responded and what they've got out of it's really important. And then we take that to working groups within the organisation to kind of filter out and understand whether we hit all of our objectives. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's how we use the data from an external point of view.
Brilliant. Thanks, Laura. So, Natalie.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. So I'm Natalie, I'm the Head of Content and Business Development at Landmark Theatres. Landmark Theatres we're a multi-site organisation with 4 venues, 2 of which are based in the beautiful North Devon, as you can see on that photo there, and 2 in our vibrant city of Peterborough. We're a proud national portfolio organisation with a mission that reaches across diverse geography and communities in areas of low cultural engagement. We're also a producing and a receiving organisation. But like many multi-site organisations, we face complex challenges of, how do we understand and evaluate our impact when we're working with such varied audiences and programmes and communities. We host performances and film and artist development programmes and participation. There's a lot happening. So our journey with Indigo started, much like Laura's, with a project to help us build a comprehensive evaluation framework. So we needed something that could really bring coherence across all 4 of our venues. And something that would help us track our KPIs and ultimately provide meaningful insights we could act on. And that work was incredibly helpful. Since then, we've gone further, and we are now proud users of Indigo Share. So we recently received our annual share report. And just as we were preparing for our sort of senior leadership and board away day, so it's perfect timing, because this directly informed the refresh of our business plan and then the refresh of our audience development plans and strategies for the year. So that really does mean that we now have a clearer picture on what we're doing well, and just as importantly, where we need to focus a little bit more energy as well. So we take insight really seriously, and I drive conversation and reference them in almost every board meeting and during SLT away days. We use this feedback as a basis for in-depth discussion. So it's not just a report that we skim. It's a tool that we really use to drive strategy. It's helped us identify areas where we're underperforming, particularly being in regions of areas of low cultural engagement. Benchmarking with other Indigo users really allows us to understand our context and our goals more realistically, giving us the confidence that we're heading in the right direction, really. So as head of content, I work really closely with our head of programme and production, and we use the share data regularly in our weekly programming meetings and also our team away days. And the qualitative questions are incredibly useful. So especially questions like whether the audiences like eclectic work, or whether they prefer something familiar, or whether they like to feel challenged or provoked. These responses really gives us the nuance that we need to plan responsibly, but also creatively. So for instance, if a new production feels risky, we can check whether we feel that there is appetite for unfamiliar work is there, or whether we need to build that appetite more gradually. So it's a vital balance really between an artistic ambition and audience alignment. Beyond programming, the share data has influenced our organisational strategy. So we pay close attention to how our audiences respond to questions like, do we lead the way for culture in our area? Are we important to our local community? And are people proud to live here? These insights have prompted us to revisit our brand recognition, our positioning on culture boards, and even our role in contributing to the local economy. So we're now exploring how we can better evidence our economic impact, especially in anticipation of future funding rounds, and to highlight the role in tourism for both of our region. Finally, I just wanted to end on a really personal note. So much of the feedback means a great deal to the people on the ground, especially our volunteer workforce in Peterborough, who are essential to our operations. They give their time and their energy and their care every single day, really. So when our audience feedback includes something truly positive and heartfelt, it doesn't just inform your strategic planning, it boosts morale, it gives people purpose, it reinforces why we do what we do. We've included a few of those lovely comments on here in this final slide, just a little celebration of the people and stories behind the data, really. So that's a little look at how we are using insights and feedback at Landmark Theatres. I think for me personally, it is not just about ticking boxes and a box ticking exercise, but it's trying to actually shape what we do, how we work with our teams, and then how we connect with our audiences and our places. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura and Natalie. It's just great to hear how the data is being used in so many different ways and so powerfully to underpin what you're doing. So I'm going to round off now with one final slide of key takeaways before we then open up to the Q&A. So do put any questions in the chat. So my 5 key takeaways for this year are, firstly, accessibility. So as we saw in our recent hot topic, access culture, access requirements are no longer just about checking that you have level access or hearing loops, although those are obviously expected requirements. 1 in 10 audiences express an access requirement and 15% say they have a disability, and there's a gap in need and satisfaction. So we need to think more broadly about this. So for example, we know that younger audiences are far more likely to have sensory rather than physical requirements. They might need to know the days or times when your foyer may be busy, how to get a drink without queuing at the bar, or they might need visual stories to help them prepare for their visit. Most audiences with access requirements need far more information than is currently available on your websites. So the need is to test your website with people who have a range of access requirements and different needs, and make improvements. And we also know that many of these improvements will also be welcomed by people who don't claim to have any disability or access requirements as well. This year's results show once again that well-being and escapism are some of the biggest personal impacts of engaging with arts and culture. So in a time when we know that funding is frankly terrifying and the whole sector feels uncertain, let's lean into these broader benefits for audiences. Let's remind them that we're here to make them feel great and to give them the mindful moments and escape that they're seeking in a busy and stressful world. And then let's tell stakeholders, funders and donors, so share the results as Laura and Natalie are doing from your own Indigo Share subscription surveys or the sector benchmark. Do a bit of Googling and craft your own compelling narrative of why the arts is the best medicine and how you're delivering on that for your local residents in your area. Younger and new audiences are increasingly likely to attend for a special occasion, and we keep banging on about this in all the research we're doing. We're seeing it going up and up. It's consistent every year, and we've explored it at length in our hot topic Tomorrow's Audience 18 months ago. But I think sometimes we get the thinking on this wrong. We don't have to wait until there's a show, film or exhibition that we decide feels like a special occasion one. Oh, that's Dirty Dancing, so lots of people will come to that for a special occasion or whatever it is. We need to make ourselves a solution for any occasion, get ourselves there top of mind to both current and potential audiences. So I'm sure many of you have these, but if you don't, make sure you have and you actively promote a special occasion package that's available on any show. Talk frequently on social and in paid campaigns about how special it is to spend time at your place. Perhaps you could promote it as a different or a quirky way to celebrate a special moment. Literally show people having a great time, clearly celebrating something in your imagery, and make sure that if they're thinking of a special occasion, that you're in the mix. Fourthly, invest in your brand marketing. I know it's easier said than done, but people want to spend time in places where they feel welcome, they feel at home, and they identify with the values and, quite frankly, the vibe. If you're on the hamster wheel of show by show promotion, jump off and invest some time and money in talking about who you are, what you stand for, and what benefits you offer audiences. We've seen that leap in the percentage of people saying that they love the organisation, they love the venue. that hasn't just happened by accident. That's because many of the organisations in this benchmark have really been investing time and effort in that. So make it very clear what your audiences will get out of a visit to you. Try and tell the story that arcs across everything you programme, not just the story of that visit to that show. So build on your relationships with audiences after they've been, not simply to sell them another show, but to ask them about their experience. So using something like Indigo Share, tell them what you've changed after their feedback, offer them ways to dive further into the thing that they came to see, tell them about the impact they've had on a young person's life thanks to the top-up donation they made. So all of these things, and that brings us on to sustainability. We need to shout, not just talk. We need to shout about sustainability now, because the message is not getting through, and we have to get more confident and vocal on this issue as a sector. The metric is persistently low. Only half the respondents think that you're showing a commitment to sustainability. There's loads that can help you in our 3 years of Act Green research, all open access on our website. We've also picked up some top tips from our Indigo Share subscribers this year who are doing it really well, particularly around the messaging around fundraising campaigns, around sustainability initiatives. That can really help cut through. If you can't do either of these, then why not talk about what your audiences are doing to help you be greener, like the decrease in petrol car usage in this year's benchmark, or things you can feel very confident about, local food sourcing in your cafe, recycling, the sort of things that Laura's created for the bar and the cafe for people to see what they're actually doing. From what audiences tell us, we need to worry less about being accused of greenwashing or about someone challenging us, and be more confident to shout about what we are doing, own what we're not yet doing, and get this conversation front and centre with audiences. We're about to embark on a project to create a toolkit for communicating sustainability funded by Arts Council England. And we're actually looking for organisations in England who might like to be part of the pilot for that. So if you're interested, please get in touch and we can tell you a bit more about it. So we're going to take some questions in a sec. Before we do, here's a quick summary of how you can join Indigo Share subscription if you're not part of it, so you could be part of the next benchmark. There's 3 different share subscription plans and prices. All of it's available on our website. If you'd like to know more, you could book in and come along to one of our Indigo Share demos. The next one is on the 5th of June, and we'll pop the link in the chat, or just get in touch with us by email.